100%, projetor em tela.
Beleza, galera? Mais um vídeo aqui no canal hoje, trazendo dia 9 de agosto, nosso segundo vídeo do dia. E hoje sim é a grande final do Detroit Become Human, né? E amanhã começamos com Resident Evil. Ok? E lembrando vocês também, temos mais um evento daqui a pouquinho. Escrito do Stardew Valley e da Riot Games durante a noite.
Play button.
Ligado aqui comigo. Vamos lá.
Pause button. Video progress.
I think that we've started. Oh, my timer has started. Excellent. Hello, everybody. Welcome to PAX East. Y'all are less excited than I would have expected from a Thursday. You can't be tired yet. How many of you also flew in last night very, very late? Not many of you. A couple of you. Excellent. Okay, so you should all be more well-rested than Hayden and I, at minimum. So I do expect to see some energy from this panel. Yeah. Excellent. Thank you so much. I'm so excited. So welcome to the Psychology of Stardew Valley. So this panel is specifically, we're going to talk about some of like psychology and Stardew Valley related topics. A lot of this is stemming from the book, The Zeitgeist of Pop Culture, Stardew Valley, which explores psychological concepts related to communities and gameplay and narrative within the very popular video game of Stardew Valley. Before we get started, we're going to do a couple of introductions. So I'm Dr. Elizabeth Kilmer. I'm a licensed clinical psychologist. I work with Respect Psychological Services, which is a mental health and psychology clinic located out in Seattle, as well as with Take This, which is a mental health and games nonprofit. A lot of my work is focused at the intersection between games and therapy and ADHD and autism and well-being in online communities.
And I am Hayden Jones. I am a clinical mental health counselor also at Respect Psychological Services out in Seattle. I work with a pretty broad community on various different things, but a lot of it involves integrating video games and tabletop role-playing games into sort of therapeutic spaces and educational spaces as a structured support for helping build social skills, confidence, and those kinds of things.
Yeah, so my name is Tiernan Cahill. I'm a PhD candidate at Boston University in emerging media, and I do computational social scientific research on video games and virtual reality and how people use them to regulate emotions and deal with stress and generally try and regulate themselves in an adaptive way.
Awesome. So before we get into like the real questions, I'm curious. We have not talked about this beforehand. I'm really curious. When you first played Stardew Valley, who was your first romance choice? So we can all judge you.
So I'm going to give an answer that is deeply qualified, and I will withhold the qualification. First choice was Abigail. It is not final choice, is what I will say.
I mean, okay, so you have to qualify that now.
Okay. I had a journey of self-discovery of my own with Stardew Valley. Started with Abigail, and then I realized, like, hey, you're living with your parents, everything's kind of free, and you sure do complain a lot about your circumstances and say that everybody's terrible all the time. That's interesting initially, but a bit of a negative energy later. So eventually realized, you know, there is Maru who has her own interests, is like developing herself as a person, and I get to be part of that. Makes me feel more wanted. So I think it was sort of a journey of maturity for myself.
You redeemed yourself, I think. Did Hayden redeem himself? Yeah? Okay,
There we go.
excellent.
We'll take it, yeah.
What about you?
Yeah, so my first playthrough, I romanced Emily, and then got a little bit weirded out by the trippy dream sequence that you necessarily have to go through to develop a relationship with her. So then my next playthrough, I romanced Leah, and came to regret that about halfway through. Not because there's anything wrong with Leah, I think she needs some space and some time to heal and find herself before she gets into another relationship. So my canonical preference mod choice is that I should be in a polycule with Demetrius and Robin. Because, I mean, come on, you've got mental attributes, you've got physical attributes, they're great parents. Yeah.
I think, yeah, absolutely. My first choice for Ministry was Penny, which I stand by. I feel very good about that. She's really smart. She taught kids. She's a woman. It's better. My second playthrough, I was like, I have to do something different, and so I romanced Sebastian, which you get a frog, and that's cool. So that's...
When you said second choice, I definitely thought you were going to be like, so second choice, I decided Krobus is the only one for me. Yeah.
The platonic friend relationship with Krobus is probably my next iteration, to be totally honest. Yeah, we'll see what happens.
Yeah.
All right, let's start getting into some of the serious stuff. So this next slide is just going to be for the people in this room, not those watching at home. Actually, that's not true. The next slide is for everybody, because I'm good at remembering things. So if you're interested in a little bit more about the book, this QR code is for you. So this talks about, this will give you a link to the book. To be clear, the PDF for this book is free. It is open access. So you're welcome to read the PDF. If you want to purchase a physical copy because you want a trophy, you can do that. But if you're just interested in the information or the content, then that PDF is for you. We had several other authors who were not able to make it here today, but wrote really lovely chapters. We're going to touch on some of the content from those chapters today as well. But if you want to really get the deep dive that you get from a whole book, that's where you go. Okay, I think everybody has QR code. So this next slide is just for the people in this room and not for the whole internet, because I trust y'all more than I trust the whole internet. We have hours and hours of content that we could get through for this panel. We only have 53 minutes and 40 seconds left. So this is a link to a Q&A, online Q&A thing. You can ask questions. You can also upvote other people's questions if you think they're really good and you want to learn about them. If you put trolly stuff in the questions, I will turn off the Q&A because I cannot moderate them while I am up here. Are we all on board with this? I'm about to move away from this slide so that the whole internet doesn't have access to it. So if you think you might want to ask a question later, now is the time to scan the QR code before it goes away.
Or if you don't want to ask questions.
But you just want to upvote.
Yeah, I want to upvote other people's questions.
Yeah, because otherwise you just get what we've come up with as questions, which is great, but may not be the topics that you care about the most. All right, I don't see any more. Oh no, I see 3 more cameras up. Okay. Excellent. The whole internet can have access to this slide again. So let's jump in a little bit. So Hayden, I actually want to start with you. You wrote one of the first chapters in the book,
Yes.
specifically talking about the allure of virtual farming. Can you speak a little bit about agrotourism, what that is, and its appearance in cozy games?
Yes, absolutely. I think oftentimes when we refer to games like Stardew Valley, often other games, Stardew Valley, Harvest Moon, of course, the kind of spiritual predecessor, Animal Crossing, the sort of new indie hit Pokopia would probably fall into this. We oftentimes will use the term cozy farming sim because it's a slight differentiation. When we talk about like agricultural games, you've also got like Farming Simulator, which is about let's recreate like pixel for pixel what it's like to live on a farm without all the smells. And so there are these unique qualities to being in a rural setting that you are cultivating in your own kind of design, trying to be in a space that is away from what might be some of the more stressful parts of life that is presented by this. And it traces back to the concept of agritourism, which is that idea of connecting yourself with the agricultural world around you. There are, of course, communities, I would say probably the majority of communities that involve being in touch with some sort of interaction with agriculture, be it farming communities, be it places that are sort of providing the services that provide the goods that we use every day. So having something that connects us to that idea is uniquely appealing, and having the ability to, as it's put in fiction, the escaping the city trope, going off into the country, just about any Hallmark movie you're going to see the theme of like, I've left the big city and now I'm in the country. And so having that in a game style where it allows you to escape, get to see some of these things, spend some time with animals that you can give all sorts of ridiculous fun names, build a farm in your own image, and get to know this smaller, more cohesive group is going to be inherently appealing. And that in real life with agritourism, that's when we're seeing things like farmers markets, we're seeing things like farm tours, like therapies that involve going into the countryside, learning to work with animals, learning to work with those kinds of things.
So like the targeted ads I keep getting for like cuddle sessions with Highland cows?
Yes, almost exact. That would be an example of agritourism. And so you've got the different areas of that, from cuddling with Highland cows to go out and pet an alpaca on a farm in the countryside, all the way through the dude ranch industry that was popular at one point, where you could go out and pay to wear a cowboy hat and ride a horse and sort of get to play a cowboy for a brief period of time for a certain designated amount of money, which predates television, let alone video games.
So it sounds like it's getting access to some of the appealing parts or the pieces of kind of farming or agriculture that we might really romanticize without the responsibility.
Oh yeah, like Highland cows are great up until you have to shovel manure. And so it's, you get to pick and choose.
It's also without the sense of control, right? Is
Yeah.
that in Stardew Valley, you get to make all of the choices about your farm, what you grow, how it looks, how you arrange it, and you're an active participant. Whereas I think in most agritourism, you are at best an active participant for a couple of weeks.
Yeah,
Right.
An active participant, and also usually within a controlled environment, and it can oftentimes be sort of that educational opportunity. So it's more of, I'm observing this and I'm learning these skills and I'm doing these things, as opposed to I'm home from work and want to go feed a cow. You don't have to go feed the cow. You get to. And I think that kind of is the differentiation between what makes it cozier versus what makes it feel like work.
So it sounds like some of this is you're losing some of the kind of realistic pieces when we're making it cozy, when we're making it a video game, but you're gaining this, and you're gaining this sense or this real access to kind of control and autonomy within the space that you may have less of in those other places where you were just a tourist.
Absolutely.
So kind of building on top of that, what are some of the other kind of really main drivers in appeal and engagement in kind of Stardew Valley's core game loop, as well as some of the other mechanics?
Yeah, so with things like this is again where we can look at cozy games more broadly, where it is not just Stardew Valley. Stardew Valley is just an exemplar of a lot of these concepts. Stuff like you've got the rural part of it, that you get cows. People like having cows in games. You can pet a dog. Any game you can pet a dog, automatic 10 out of 10. There's routine that's built into it, which has been a really significant part of the sort of success of these, is the idea of like, oh, I know what I'm going to do tomorrow in the game as I move into this thing. There is, oh, I'm looking forward to the crops coming in a couple of in-game days. There's this sense of routine and accomplishment that comes with, I'm getting to do these things and get to see the world change around me as I impact it. That can sometimes be missing in daily life. Like in Stardew Valley, I can see a parsnip grow from seed to full in a couple of in-game minutes, versus in real life where it's like, yeah, I can plant the seed, I need to put it into a seedling, then like if I don't water it right, it's gonna die, and then even if I get it outside, it might have a disease. So there's just so many other factors. You don't get to see your work rewarded in as many ways. Then outside of that just solitary gameplay loop, there's also, it's a dating sim in many ways. You've got these relationships. Like, first question is, who do you romance in Stardew Valley? I think it's a very telling question. It's part of the appeal is you get to play a game with these deep characters with backgrounds and their own stories and ways that they contribute. So it also meets that need for connection, for getting to maybe live out a romantic fantasy in relation to the story that you're trying to create in the game. That really just brings it extra level of appeal because you're not only investing in building your farm, you're building relationships within the game.
I would also just jump in and add, like, you can, but you don't have to.
Yes.
It's sort of like the principle that goes across the entire game. And I think that is part of the appeal of the game. I think it's also part of what makes the game feel very cozy and relaxing and non-threatening. And I think that, on a spectrum, one of the things that makes games appealing generally is that you have a lot of control over what your experience is moment to moment. There's this principle called selective exposure and mood management theory that originally sort of talks about like how you select pieces of media based on how you're feeling and what you need in that moment. So, you might choose which album to listen to or which TV show to watch based on how it will regulate your mood. But in video games, you not only get to choose the game, you get to choose what you're doing in the game. And in Stardew Valley, that choice is wide open. There's almost nothing that you have to do in Stardew Valley if you don't want to.
So building on that, also amazing job with the questions, y'all. You're doing great. I'm very excited to get to these. So building on that piece as well, I'm actually curious, how many of y'all did not do very much like actual social person interaction in the game for the first, 5, 10, most, like I did not want to talk to people for the first year I was playing that game. I'm a therapist. I love being a therapist. I love talking to people in my real life. I was like, I don't want to have to make friends on the onlines. I just want to grow my little crops. I just want to pet my cows. I just want to go in the mines and hit things with sticks. I don't be nice to people. And so having that kind of flexibility is really, really lovely. Can you expand a little bit on if you think that was also one of the reasons why we may have seen this resurgence of interest in Stardew Valley during the pandemic, as well as like huge success with Animal Crossing?
Oh yeah, absolutely. I think that one of the things that happened during the pandemic that is part of going through sort of sudden, difficult life circumstances is that you lose a feeling of routine and control, right? That you don't get to choose how you're spending each of your days. And so a game that facilitates that, where you literally get to choose how you spend each of your in-game days. You can go fishing, you can plant crops, you can explore the forest, you can go into the mines, and the game doesn't penalize you for any of those choices, really. And so I think that is especially appealing at a time when that sort of choice is absent from your day-to-day life, where you feel that choice is absent from your day-to-day life. I also think like that during the pandemic, that was a disruption to a lot of people's routine and what they were used to happening day to day, and a loss of predictability, right, which is inherently stressful. And so being able to go back into a place where you know exactly what will happen if you plant a parsnip and water it for 4 days. You know exactly how long each season is going to last. Right? You know what to expect on each level of the mines. You know that if you talk to people, it's almost never going to go poorly. Like you have sort of a real sense of, I get to choose what I want to do, and I know what the outcome will be. And I think that that's especially appealing when you don't feel like that in your day-to-day life.
And I would say to add to that too, one of the unique things that these things did around the pandemic was also provide a bit of a platform to interact. Because if we look at sort of broader games as well, there's a chance to sort of exist in the same space as somebody, even if you're doing independent things. Like you can play in a game with friends where one person is going off to the mines while you are staying behind to water crops. So there is this sense of place, which I think during lockdowns people didn't have access to. So having access to a shared space where you can socialize in addition to the routine things that you're saying, I think it's kind of the perfect storm to make these games boom in popularity, which it did. We saw a significant increase in players, especially new players to games like this during times, if you look at sales charts and sort of participation charts.
Absolutely. One of the chapters specifically talks about the way in which kind of Stardew Valley and games broadly can facilitate long-distance relationships, both kind of platonic and romantic, because you're having this opportunity to kind of engage in things together, right? It's not always just a phone call or a Zoom call. I don't know how many of y'all engaged in like large family Zoom calls during early days of the pandemic that were actively painful to stay engaged on. Having that opportunity to jump into a space and connect, and especially when, like Stardew Valley, which allows for so much customization, it allows for kind of this shared building of memories, getting to interact through kind of the space. So we're just going to go ahead and jump into audience questions because y'all have done great. The most upvoted question so far is, what does being a JoJo supporter say about a person? I will start here, which is the number of people, or the percentage of people who've actually completed the JoJo run is so small. It is not what we would expect in terms of if the game gave you 2 options and you picked one, right? I cannot remember the exact number. It is in the book, but I want to say that it was somewhere between 6 and 16% of Steam users. It was very small. And I don't have the data on this, but I really love to know, of those users, how many of them had already completed a run of the game.
I think it's a completionist thing. If it's that, even 16 seems high.
I think completionist, or you're someone who likes to experiment with games, right? You want to do things in the game to see what the game will respond with, not necessarily role playing or acting in the way that you would want to act. I think that in the same way as a lot of evil playthroughs of RPGs, people are doing it because they want to see what is hidden behind that door. Less so because they want an outlet to be evil. I do think that part of why the JoJo option exists in the game, though, is less for people to actually choose it and more to make rebuilding the community center feel like a choice, right? The community center is clearly preferred. The way that it's set up in the game.
Well, and it reminds me, there's some really interesting research that says, if there's a thermometer on the wall in your office, even if that thermometer doesn't do, a thermostat that you can move up and down, doesn't actually do anything, you will feel better and more in control of your environment. This is obviously more of a real choice. It's not like you click that option and the game goes, no, that's a bad choice. You can't do that. But I want to add on a little bit to what you said around, it's not that people necessarily want to be evil. So when I first started using games in therapy, I was specifically using Dungeons and Dragons. And I was doing work with children who'd experienced trauma and military veterans, most of which who'd experienced trauma. And specifically, it was in a substance use unit. And it was pretty common for some of my players to say, oh yeah, my character is an evil character. And then you would kind of ask them more questions. And what you'd really start to find is that for a lot of them, sometimes choosing an evil character was boundary testing, right? Are you going to let me make this choice? Is this autonomy that you claim that I have real? But sometimes it would be because these individuals felt really bad about themselves. They thought they were bad people. They thought that this is what they deserved. And then you would let them go into the game and see what choices they made, and they would save children at great risk to themselves, and help a village, but refuse the reward. And so these were really at odds with this kind of evil alignment that they had claimed. And so I would love to do some more research and learn a little bit more about some of the reasons that people are choosing this. Because I can see, in addition to completionists, in addition to just boundary testing of the game, that it's another way for people who feel like they don't have a lot of control in their life to.
Mm-hmm. Oh boy, if we're keeping this in the lane of Stardew, but broadly speaking, there is a lot of research on why people pick the evil choices in games, be it kind of those additional pieces of context. Oftentimes, JoJo Mart is kind of the exception in that a lot of the times the evil narratives can also be more fleshed out, because you've got to prove, why is this the right choice? I don't think they necessarily do that in Stardew Valley. It is pretty spot on to recognize, oh no, these are the bad guys. Mm-hmm. You start off leaving working for JoJo Mart. So if you then go to the country, have this oh, you've got a farm, you've got new things that you're supporting, and then go straight back to doing that, it's narratively going against sort of the entire driving principle at the beginning. The argument that I would make, though, is JoJo Mart evil, or do I just like money? Because one of those is a values difference, one of those is objectively evil. If I'm just wanting to make easy money and I don't care necessarily how people get hurt, JoJo Mart is a reasonable option.
Yeah,
It's
if
just
you're
when you
like
consider
gold
people.
maxing
Yeah.
Stardew Valley, then I guess Jojo Mart
Yeah,
makes
so
sense.
really
Is
it's only when people
actually
I doubt it.
better at I don't think that
I
it
think
necessarily
if
is
you
better at
plot
making
it out,
a game.
it's better at the beginning and then ends up being worse, which is like a
Oh, the
nice little
Bioshock effect,
representation
yeah.
of how
Which, when we think
know,
about
yeah.
capitalism,
Yeah.
we promised we'd bring up a little bit of capitalism.
Yeah.
We'll do this more. So the next question that people asked are, what do you think about Shane's story progression in the game? Think is such a broad question. I have lots of thoughts. Many of them are outlined in my chapter, where I specifically talk about kind of mental health representation in Stardew Valley through the arcs of Shane and Pam. I'm really glad that like Shane goes to therapy. That's great. I think that when there's a couple of specific kind of like dialogue lines where he's really struggling and you kind of have the option to interact. And the wiki lays them all out in case anyone is curious. You don't have to go back through and play it like 16 times. Where you have the option to basically be pretty unsupportive. When he's going through a really hard time, he's talking a lot about kind of depression and challenges. And even if you pick the more unsupportive options, you'll get kind of the same outcome. Like he might like you less, but he will still kind of move forward. And I think that on one hand, I think that's the right call to make, absolutely, because we don't necessarily want in Stardew Valley, which is this cozy game that doesn't come with tons of content warnings, we don't want the players' interactions to be able to make Shane's life and mental health trajectory significantly worse. But it does, I think, can lessen this feeling of your choice or your interactions with people mattering.
Yeah. I think Shane's arc is, there's a little bit of it that I like in particular near the end after he's gone to therapy. And I think you mentioned this in your chapter where you will see him still in the saloon, but he's going there to play an arcade game instead of to drink. And that is like a thing that some people do, right? Is they try and substitute one coping mechanism for a different coping mechanism because it's healthier, right? And so you sort of see the game presenting games as an alternative coping mechanism to substance use, which I mean, I've looked at a little bit of research. It doesn't necessarily always play out that way, but it's interesting that the game does like show games in that light.
As someone who ran D&D groups in residential substance use settings, I think absolutely we do. When you pull substance use out of your life, right? Especially if you meet criteria for a substance use disorder, that means that you that substances are taking up significant time and energy and space in your life. And so if you just remove those altogether, there's now a giant hole. And if you don't fill that giant hole in with something, then you will fall back into substance use, right? And so for some people, that means re-finding or re-engaging with old hobbies, right? For some people, that means finding new hobbies. A lot of the vets that I played with had not had an interest in games prior to engaging. And many of them went on to continue to play. They started playing at local game stores. Some of them were like, oh, that was their like a gateway into enjoying fantasy at all, which was really cool to see. But you're absolutely right in terms of if someone is already having challenges with regulation, if they're already feeling this need to kind of escape their life through substances, then they may also try and kind of engage in some of that escape through video games or through other online spaces. But that can also even show up with things like exercise, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like if that becomes my whole focus, if that's my only way to regulate, then I'm going to put too much time and energy into that.
Well, I think also that kind of relates to the part of the appeal of these games being in the fact that like this is a small town with like manageable people and like it is like limited things you have to manage would be one of those harming factors that comes to things like this. It's given a lot of these smaller communities do have higher rates of difficulty with some of these mental health challenges, and part of that can be down to the lack of access to those alternative methods or the like normalization of things that aren't quite as helpful. I know in my personal experience growing up in a pretty small town, the idea of video games as a way of connecting to people both online, like instead of driving 45 minutes to somebody's house, but there was a bar closer. So the idea of like there are some communities where what's accessible is not going to be the most helpful thing. So video games do in reality provide a little bit of that more equal access to some of these things.
Well, and anytime we're thinking about kind of substance use recovery or recovery from kind of anything, is you want this menu of options.
Yeah.
Right. When we think about any kind of addictive kind of behavior or any other kinds of challenges, usually that's the problem because your life shrinks down to that thing. And so if we have a variety of things that are helping get different needs met, we don't have those problems as much. And if you're in a space in which your physical opportunities may be limited, whether that be because of location, because of kind of disability, because of marginalization of any kind, because of finances, then having online options can be a really great way to add to that.
One other thing that I just want to say about Shane's arc, this is true of all of the characters, but I think is sort of most unusual for his, because it is sort of an arc where he does recover over time if you see it all the way through. It is in that vein of the game is relaxing because it never punishes you for anything. If you just stop talking to Shane at any point in that arc, nothing bad happens, right? Like, he is just sort of in stasis at whatever point in that recovery you leave him in, which is not how real social relationships work at all, but it does sort of contribute to this feeling of, if you don't want to talk to Shane after 6 heart points, you don't need to. There's no reason why you have to unless that is what you want to do.
And I think I have ADHD myself, and which, surprise, has an impact on relationships, in part because you'll get really excited on a thing, right? And that can be awesome, and that can be really great, and it can push you to kind of move forward and get stuff done. It is part of how I finished my PhD. But it also can mean that when you are really focused on that one thing, you lose focus of other things in your life. And even if that is not intentional, that can mean that you kind of stop communicating as much with friends or partners or family. And even if that was not the intention, those people can feel really ignored. They may have needed your help or needed your support or just expected to spend time with you and not gotten those options. And so having this game where you get some of the kind of reinforcement and fun, but without having that same level of responsibility that must be managed constantly, can be really valuable. Speaking of managing things constantly, another question we had come through was, why does Stardew Valley feel so satisfying to play even when tasks are repetitive?
Even when tasks are repetitive, because tasks are repetitive.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. The predictability aspect.
Yeah.
It's you kind of know what's happening. There's a sense of routine and development.
Yeah, and it's like you said, it's routine and development.
Yeah.
So you might do the same repetition every day. You might water your crops every morning, but that is still going to yield some sort of change over time where your farm is developing and growing. But I also think the game does a couple of things to mix up that feeling repetition, so it's not the same thing every day. So the seasons sort of encourage you to break up your activity, and especially like the fact that you can't grow as much in winter or anything in winter at the beginning of the game sort of pushes you towards like, okay, you've had 3 seasons of watering your crops every morning, now you take a little bit of a break. Or, when it rains, and I don't know how many people do this, but anytime it rains, I immediately go to the mines because I don't need to spend the morning watering crops. And so it's almost like woohoo, it's raining, I get to go into a cave.
First day of winter, I'm like, to the mines!
Yeah, exactly. So the game does like these little twists to break up the routine, but again, it's always optional. If I wanted to water my crops while it's raining, the game's not going to stop me or penalize me for doing that. And so in that sense, you sort of get to choose how repetitive you want the game to be. It can be super repetitive if that's what you need, is just like a sense of routine, or you can try a bunch of different things every time you sit down to play, and that's also a possibility.
So one of the things that you touched on, but I really want to highlight here is that kind of game loop, right, where you are watering crops and then you're getting more kind of information, you're selling those crops, you're getting money, you're getting more crops, but then you're also getting those tools, you're getting better at farming. So like you're learning how to like make sprinklers so that you don't have to water crops anymore, because like watering crops is like fine for a while and then it gets really boring, especially if you, I know in my second playthrough of the game, I was like, oh man, I'm gonna plant way more crops than I did my first playthrough because I have a better understanding about like the more crops I plant, the easier the first part of my game is going to be. But then I had to water all of those crops by hand. And so kind of that balance of I'm doing this routine thing, but I'm also getting to see this incremental progress, whether that is now my watering can go a little bit farther, or I know how to keep my beds wet longer, or I'm able to build those sprinklers. And so those are those pieces where there's a question later in the questions that people asked about, like, how do you know when you're done with a playthrough of Stardew Valley? And I will say for me, where I find that I'm done is like when that incremental progress kind of stops. So like I am not a Minecraft person. I'm seeing some amazing buildings that my friends are building in Pocopia right now, and I'm like, that's awesome. I will not be doing that, right? So like once I've gotten everything as optimized as possible, and then I just have to run it, I'm bored.
Yeah, same. And I think I have like a mental to-do list in my head where I have sort of like, okay, well, I want to build a path here, and then I'm going to clear this field, and then I want to make sure that, you know, I rebuild the greenhouse, and then I want an orchard here. And it's sort of like when that list is empty, that's when I'm done and just start over.
Yeah. Well, because it's also the idea of it being not just a routine, it is like 10 routines all put on top of each other. So it's the idea of like, oh, I want to farm better, so I am going to go to the mines to get the ore to upgrade the water spigot so I can water my crops easier.
And their routines are working towards something, as opposed to like when I take out my trash, that's really important. Like I need to take out my trash, I need to like cook for myself and eat food and do the dishes, but those are not things where it's not like I finish doing the dishes and like eventually my dishwasher gets upgraded magically. Like I would be so much better at doing the dishes, right?
Oh, if life had an XP bar, I'd be so much more productive.
It would be, but right, in the game there's these repetitive tasks, but they aren't so repetitive that it is exactly the same. Whereas taking out my trash, it doesn't change, which is also why taking out the trash and doing the dishes are two chores that my partner does, and I do the hard stuff that is like the novel hard stuff as a trade.
Well, I will say, when I was writing the chapter, I was getting into gardening, and if I could get like a watering can that could just like spray like a 10-foot square range of water, that would be awesome.
Those are called sprinklers?
Yeah, but then you're taking the fun out of it. I also think like the gameplay, we talk about gameplay loops, but in the long run, I think in most situations don't necessarily want to loop so much as you want to spiral, right? Like you're going around in this familiar pattern, but it's just changing a little bit each time. And I think through the progression systems, it does that really well. Yeah. But it's a tight spiral. It doesn't change quickly, which I think helps it feel like cozy and familiar.
So how do we add progression systems to boring, repetitive chores in real life?
Real life XP bar? I'm going to go back to that one.
I mean, people have tried gamification of so many things, and sometimes it works, but sometimes it just doesn't. And I think that, you know, part of the reason why we play games is because you can't have a perfectly satisfying life play spiral, right? Some things you do have to do repetitively, even though they are not intrinsically motivating. And so we play to have something that is apart from that.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I think with that gamification, that's where like you kind of put your own rewards in as the aspect of it. So it's not going to be the exact same, but it's the idea of like, okay, I have finished loading the dishwasher. I'm going to go play Stardew Valley for 20 minutes now. Like, I'm not going to jump straight into whatever my next task is. I am, because I can't task switch to save my life. But like, generally speaking, the idea of like, yes, I finished this thing. How can I make a reward for myself since the thing's not intrinsically motivating?
I with clients, I find that I will often use the gamification to like get tasks started again, right? So like if you've fallen off, you've really struggled, it's helpful to get things up and going. And then as you get up and going, yeah, the game doesn't necessarily get, or the real life task doesn't get more rewarding, but your fluency with the task does improve. And so how much like mental effort it takes up will kind of go down over time. Even for people with ADHD, don't listen to the internet telling you you cannot have habits. It is possible. So I think those kinds of pieces are really important. We also can find that gamification can teach consistency, which is really important when we're thinking about reducing that overall mental load. For sure. Excellent question. Next question is, if you could add a mechanic to Stardew Valley that would be mentally positive for players, what would you add?
I can't just answer it's perfect as it is.
Yeah. I think my issue is it like, for a game to be mentally positive, it's about how it's being used. So yeah, just
I can't
to
just
add a
play a
mechanic.
game and not think about it and magically fix myself forever.
I mean,
I have to reflect.
it will solve it all the way until it shows back up.
Okay, so I have
can
I have
ignore
based
it,
on that
but
a
yeah.
partial answer, which
Okay.
is so one of the things that comes up a lot, at least in my research, is that people play different video games for wildly different reasons when it comes to managing their emotions. So Stardew Valley might be on one end of that spectrum, where it's a lot about like routine and comfort and reassurance and predictability, and on the other end of that spectrum is like Elden Ring, right, where it's about but the thing is, both of those are totally valid, right? Like sometimes you need a really difficult challenge that you push yourself to overcome so that you can sort of reframe how you see challenge in general. And that is the utility of one sort of category of game. And the sort of predictability and routine and safety is the category of another kind of game. And people get to choose which is useful for them. Sometimes, like for me, it's both. And so I don't think that it would necessarily make Stardew Valley better, but I think if you wanted to expand the scope of what the game could do, having like a Stardew Valley realism mode where you had
Survival mode?
Yeah, like survival mode, where you had to actually like feed yourself in order to not die, or where there were real like penalties to falling in the mines, I think wouldn't necessarily make it better at what it does, but it would allow people to use it for something different that would also be positive.
So your answer is, it's great. It could also be multiple games at once.
Yeah.
Yes.
And that would
It
give
is
it
already multiple games
more
at once. We're just like adding one more.
That works for AAA titles.
Yeah.
Let's just, everything is the same game.
Yeah, like if Fallout 4 can be a farming sim, then Stardew Valley can be a survival sim.
I can't disagree with that, but I want to.
One of the things that comes up for me about this is there's a really important question, is like mentally positive or like it's good for the mental well-being of who? Because different players are going to need different things. And this is something that comes up a lot, especially when we're talking about addiction or like game addiction and stuff as well. You can't just arbitrarily decide that like people should only be able to play video games for 2 hours a day or for 30 minutes a day or for 1 hour a day. Hopefully y'all have all heard of Child's Play Charity, which works to get like video games into children's hospitals. If a kid is in a hospital and they can't be doing a lot else, it might make a lot of sense for them to be playing 6 hours a day. Right? One of the big differences we see between like Stardew Valley and Animal Crossing is that Animal Crossing has that like real-time clock, right? And so especially early on in the game, there's only so much you can kind of do in a day before there's not as much to do, especially really early game. You have to kind of wait longer. Whereas Stardew Valley, it's like each day is about 15 minutes. And so players can find themselves getting kind of like sucked into Stardew Valley and like being like, oh, it's been 4 hours, I did not realize, right? Where that can be harder to do in Animal Crossing. Neither one of those is like inherently better or worse for you, but it depends on what you need in that moment and where you might struggle. When I'm working with clients or when I'm thinking about kind of myself and my own ability to regulate, like I have a personal rule where I don't start new books on like school nights, on weeknights, because I will stay up way too late. right? That doesn't mean I don't ever get to read new books, but I know that for me, that's the thing that's going to get me to push way past my bedtime. And so thinking about those kinds of options. So like if someone was somebody who like really struggled to like realize what time it is, like you could say like, okay, well we could add in something that says like, hey, you've been playing for 2 hours. Do you want to take a break?
Although I do think that Stardew Valley, relative to most other games, already does that really, really well with this sort of like segmentation of the days. One of the things that has come up in my research is like what sort of game design features let people stop at whatever for them is a healthy amount of gaming time, which, like you said, can be very different for different people in different circumstances. And one of the things is, does the game have natural stopping points, right? Does it have places where you've completed a mission, right? So it makes sense to stop now. Or, you know, you've played for a certain amount of time and now you need to like rest up in real time. Those are games that people tend to have a little bit more agency over how long they play, compared to things where you can just keep taking one more turn forever. And I think Stardew Valley, by breaking things up into these 15-minute segments, actually makes it really easy to stop after a certain number
Well, you
of
know
increments.
you're committing to another 15 minutes
Yeah.
if you start a day, whereas if it's a game where you could just, like it's just continuous, you could keep playing, then you could say like just one more minute, and then that one more minute turns into 30 minutes, as opposed to like you're committing to a chunk of time.
Yeah.
Excellent.
I still agree with the Dark Souls boss's answer. End of year 2, bam, shows up at your farm. Timer is a close second.
Oh man. Actually, when Grandpa comes back to see how you're doing,
Here's boss music,
The final boss.
health bar appears on the top of the
Multi-stage
screen.
boss.
if you've disappointed him,
Yep.
like you haven't gotten married, he's like, all right.
Stage 1 is the bed and the nightcap. Stage 2 is like otherworldly monster.
Someone please make this mod.
Stardew Valley 2.
Next question is, what makes Stardew Valley's characters stand out as compared to all its imitators? And I would say, like, in addition to imitators, just like broadly within the same genre, feel,
Predecessors too.
yeah,
Yeah.
spiritual relations.
Yeah. Stardew Valley is not Harvest Moon.
I've got an answer to this because I was just talking about this. So I started playing Coral Island a couple of months ago. It was one of the things that several of the authors had brought up in terms of it has a really similar feel in a lot of ways to Stardew Valley, but it really expands some of the kind of diversity elements. You also have like way more characters to talk to. There's a lot more of a social aspect to that game. I actually really like the Stardew Valley character progression arcs because it feels like almost every single interaction you have with a character is meaningful. Like you're not going to have tons and tons of interactions with them throughout the whole game, and so the interactions you do have really pack a punch. Whereas in Coral Island, and this is not inherently bad, it's just different, you have more like kind of like mundane or day-to-day interactions with characters, and some of the cutscenes are just like slice of life kinds of things, which I get bored with very quickly in the middle of my farming sim. And so that feels different, where like I know that if there's a cutscene in Stardew Valley or there's something that I want to kind of pay attention to, like I'm going to pay more attention to that interaction than I will in a game that is going to give me more just like general context or content.
Yeah, and I think that there's like not having those slice of life in addition to the idea of, in many ways with these people, like the characters that you are interacting with and learning about and building relationships with within the game, you are not the main character in their narrative for a lot of it. Like, yes, there are the cutscenes that you are developing by adding in the like you're giving gifts or things, but the characters are going around doing their own things, working at their jobs, like interacting with other characters within the world. And that's just a good part of world building, is having the idea that this world is existing without you, so you get to be an active participant and you are like making the voluntary choice to engage with it. So then it makes these people feel so much more real when you do get to have their attention for that, like the more developing, more deep, intentional narrative moments, because you've seen them go play video games down at the tavern. Like you've seen them going about their day without you having to act on it.
I think that also, and this isn't necessarily something that makes the characters more powerful or meaningful, but I think, for someone who experiences social anxiety, it is a difference from Stardew Valley to like a lot of other RPGs where there's very few wrong choices, right? Like basically all of your relationships are guaranteed to get positive, or guaranteed to get better the more times you talk to people. Like if you look at the amount of positive bonus that you get from like giving someone something that they like as opposed to the negative that you get from giving something they don't like, it's way, way easier to make people like you than it is to offend them or make them dislike you.
Well, and the game doesn't even tell you, like, it's not like you've lost a bunch of points,
Yeah.
right? Like, you have to care enough about the back end to really kind of like dig into that.
So there's very little like downside or risk to the social interactions in Stardew Valley. And I don't think that necessarily makes them more powerful. I think it does mean that it's easier to sort of to follow those paths, right, and not worry about like, am I going to mess up my run through by alienating Tally?
Yeah,
right,
did I
so
make
she
this
doesn't
one
talk to me again.
choice in Baldur's Gate 3, and now I have to decide if it's worth going back and replaying like
Right,
4
exactly.
hours?
And like that doesn't happen in Stardew Valley. You can make everyone like you.
Well, and it also as much anxiety as it caused me, having one of the first things in the game be like, go and introduce yourself to everyone you're going to meet in the whole game. It does provide a means for you to meet people and for you to sort of have the world expand that I think a lot of aspects of the game see that gradual expansion from sort of a smaller thing. You start with like your first piece of crop and you're watering it with a can. The next thing you know, you've got sprinklers and it's like you've very naturally progressed to this. So starting it with, yes, there's a whole town of people. You need to introduce yourself to all of them. You don't even know what this holiday is, but you do know that nobody's going to dance with you. And so it kind of really solidifies that idea of like, oh, okay, yeah, these are people who all know each other and interact and are like more realistic and human. And I can ingratiate myself as part of this community. So you get to feel not just that you are progressing a ticker, but you are getting to know people as time goes on and as you're like learning more about the world that you're inhabiting while you play the game.
I will say it's also just really nice, and this is not just a Stardew Valley thing, that kind of no matter your romantic choice, the rest of the town is on board.
Yeah.
Which is not something that like we see in terms of those options. And it's also really important to remember when we have these conversations, especially when we talk about representation, that like Stardew Valley came out in 2016, and I think it was 2016.
I'm bad with numbers.
I think you're right.
Someone correct me if I'm wrong. And the shifts that there were there in terms of that kind of, you get to get married and have kids regardless of the gender of your character or the romanceable character, was something that we didn't see as much in games, and has really allowed other games to kind of jump off from that platform and continue forward, which is really exciting to see. I'm excited about this next question. So next question is there a best practice when adding or discussing content or trigger warnings for heavy topics in cozy games? I would say that we can just like strike through the cozy part of this. Like, yes, there is best practice. I would definitely point you towards Dr. Kelly Dunlap, who is also with Take This. She's a psychologist and also has a master's degree in game design and has like several really awesome presentations specifically about content or trigger warnings. Some of the main concerns we see that people talk about is like, oh man, this is going to be like a spoiler and it's going to ruin it. Having a content warning does not tell you like exactly what's going to happen or when the thing is going to happen, but it means that people in your audience are going to feel safer playing that game. And what I mean by safer is not scared, right? Like if you're making a cozy game, but you want there to be some like excitement, or you're making a horror game and you want people to be really scared, you want them to be scared on purpose because they chose to, not because you suddenly surprise them with something that is going to feel really scary or traumatizing. So typically some of the general best practices like do it, just give some clear warning. Some games will give you the option to adjust or change some of that content, like make the spiders look less like spiders. That's awesome. But especially if you are making a cozy game, there's no reason that you can't also engage in challenging topics, but you should give people a heads up so they have an idea and they can make that choice for themselves, whether or not to engage.
And I think you're right that that's important for all games, but I think it is especially important for cozy games because people have sort of an idea of what to expect from different genres of game. Like it's unlikely that I'm going to go into like a survival horror shooter and not expect there to be any violence. But I think people's expectations of cozy games is largely absent of a lot of challenging topics. And so making sure that that is front and center, I think, becomes doubly important when it's not going to be assumed by a large portion of the audience.
And I think also ultimately what you're trying to do is give them the information necessary to make a decision about it. So it's with a cozy game, like what somebody finds cozy might be different. Like there may be somebody whose ideal cozy game is spider farming simulator, and like that's not going to work for somebody with arachnophobia. So just giving that warning ahead of time of like this game has spiders is not necessarily spoiling it or making it inaccessible to everybody or like trying to gatekeep it. It is letting them know like, hey, before you go in, this theme will be here.
I do think if you name your game Spider Farmer Simulator, like that is a content warning that there will be spiders.
But like Pony Island is not a good content advertisement for what is actually in Pony Island, right? So like in a situation like that, I think then that's when it's
if you're engaging in what could be argued as false advertising, don't do that. Make sure or do it with a content warning.
I would also just like throw in that making things modular, right? Like in Stardew Valley, we already sort of talked a little bit about like Shane's arc has like portrayals of substance abuse that might be triggering for some people. And so combining the content warning with, with a choice of like, you can play the game, you don't have to play this part. I think then also makes it easier for people to make those choices on their own without feeling like they're missing out.
Well, and I think like with Shane, right, like a lot of the information you get more about his substance use and challenges with depression, right, come through those heart events. And so if you start engaging with Shane and you're like, oh man, I think I know where this is going, no thank you, you have that option. And would it be great to have some explicit content warnings? Absolutely. But I do appreciate that the game allows this like progression that allows you to go like, oh, how is this feeling for me? I don't think that I want to be friends with Shane. I don't think I want to engage in that.
Well, yeah, it's that kind of was my
estava
experience
comendo.
with, I mean, first romance choice was Abigail, but then I tried Leah, and that was sort of got to a point where it's like, ooh, you seem to be
Stardew
working through
Valley,
some
na
stuff.
2016.
And if I have now finished
Até o dia de
an
hoje,
entire day full of having therapy sessions,
tem
I'm like,
conteúdo?
I don't want to
Porra.
hop on Stardew Valley and then be like, it sounds like you're really going through some stuff. Let's talk it out. So I've kind of gotten the cue in of like, oh, you've got an ex in the city. Sounds rough. I'm going to go over here with my parsnips. You have fun. Like, I get to choose that, maybe I'm not in the place to engage with this.
Yeah, we'll be friends.
Yes. Like, I wish you the best, and I've got my own stuff to do.
Absolutely. I think we've got time for like one or two more, maybe. What role did community modding play in Stardew's success?
I don't know, because this is an interesting one, because not only is there a bunch of community modding that allowed things, but it also has remained under active development for so many years that like different features have been added. I mean, it wasn't multiplayer at launch.
It wasn't. Well, and I will also say like, I recently completed another playthrough as we were working on the book, and I don't know that I would have recommended, like that I would recommend Stardew to somebody who's like doesn't play a lot of games at all to start with, because it does feel like there are so many more options now, which is like great for me because I was like, ooh, exciting, like lots of new stuff. But if I was brand new to the game, I might feel, brand new to the game, was not as familiar with cozy games or farming sims, that might have felt kind of overwhelming. And so it's interesting in terms of like with modding, that's another option to like add layers.
More custom.
And so I'm curious in terms of especially some of the mods specifically around representation, I can see how that would pull new players in, but I'm almost curious if some of what modding has done is really helped maintain player interest longer than it would have with just the base game.
I think it's symbiotic with the ongoing development too, right? Is that the modding community can sort of show what the community is interested in, right? And then that can go into the ongoing development of the game. But modding itself is also like a form of play, right? Like it's another way in which people get to play with Stardew Valley in addition to just playing it.
Well, we haven't talked as much about kind of some of the kind of fan experiences, the community experiences, but like y'all are all here, which is awesome, right? And we expected you to show up because Stardew does have such a strong community around it, and it's a community that's really known for being relatively non-toxic. Like y'all have done amazing with the Q&A. Excellent, excellent work. Yes, give yourselves a round of applause. We threw all of our questions out the window because I was like, oh, we had a question about this. This is worded better.
Yeah.
You all get 1 heart point.
Yes, a whole hard point. Excellent. So yeah, absolutely. Okay, so we have a minute left, and I know that this one shuts off. We will be, if you have more questions afterwards, we are happy to talk to you. We are going to go, if you go down the hallway, and then like you turn left where there's, across from the escalators, there's chairs. That's where we're allowed to stand and not get in trouble, and we really don't want to get in trouble because we love the enforcers and appreciate the work that they do. Yes, but we will stick around after the panel. If you did enjoy this panel, one more QR code, please tell PAX. If this is a link to the feedback survey, you can fill it out for every panel that you come to. They really do actually pay attention to what people say, what people like about panels, what people don't like about panels. So like you
Next in
use your
20,
power
continuing
as
our
someone
Delta
in the
Lock run.
community,
The
and let them
puff,
know what
live,
you would like to
close,
see more
but
of. All right. I think several of us are on panels more later this week, so check the schedule. But we have 10 seconds left, so I'm just going to wave and say goodbye, and thank you so much for coming, everybody.
Thank you all. Bye. Thank you.
Okay, that does not work.
pause, play.
Bom,
button.
galera, esse foi o evento da vez do Stardew Valley, evento psicológico. Foi muito bom. Lembrando, daqui a pouco, a Riot Games, 1h30 de evento. Daqui a pouquinho, às 7 da noite. Muito obrigado por me acompanhar de manhã. Mais um evento às 2 da tarde. E à noite, o Mortal Kombat. E dia 11 começamos com um novo torneio do Call of Duty. Muito obrigado por me acompanhar. Valeu, falou e eu fui até o próximo vídeo.
Iniciar janela. Mostrar. App. WhatsApp. Número. OBS Studio. OBS. Interromper.